Morning, everyone. Welcome to ISAP's monthly call. We're back after about 2 months off, where we had an in-person field day and then we canceled the May call to really allow folks to focus on field work. And I know our guests this morning are farmers, and they have things waiting for them this morning. And so really appreciate them taking some time off of their busy schedules this morning to join us. As usual, I don't have my slides. Oh, there we go. The welcome slide is there. This is the Illinois Cover Crop on Farm Network monthly call hosted by ISAP, and I am Jean Brokish. And while I'm introducing myself, I encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat. You can put your name, if you are affiliated with an organization or a farmer, or what your role is in agriculture, and then also your location. We will encourage you to use the chat throughout this to ask questions of our panelists and connect with each other, of course. And just a reminder as well that the calls are recorded and posted to ISAP's website and YouTube page for viewing later. Sometimes we have a small group here and then we get, 30 or 40 or 100 views of the recording later. So this is valuable content, even if people are busy and can't join us live. But gratitude again to our farmer panelists this morning. I think we start with a poll. There we go. So just a quick entry poll on how familiar you are with the networks that farmers use to adopt conservation practices. And kind of we're looking to learn from our farmers about some of their networks. I'm going to give just a second for folks to answer that. Looks like they're good. Do we share the results then, Rachel?
I can share them.
Yeah, looks like folks are moderately familiar, or somewhat familiar at least. One thing that we want to do is learn from our farmers, but we also want to learn from our participants. So I think we can stop sharing that poll. I just closed down and I will introduce myself. I'm Jean Brokish. I am the Deputy Director for American Farmland Trust, and I'm also the Treasurer of ISAP. And for many years, I was the main facilitator and coordinator of these calls for folks. And it's been and every once in a while, I've handed that off to other people on the team, but every once in a while I get to be in the driver's seat again, and today's one of those days. And mostly because all of my teammates, with the exception of Rachel, are out in the field doing fun stuff today. And so they tapped me to be in the driver's seat, and I'm really privileged to be here this morning. And mostly because it's one of my favorite things to do is to have a panel discussion with farmers and conversation and learn from each other. So today we have a panel discussion with three farmers across Illinois: Dan Kelley, Ed Dubrick, and Jeff O'Connor. And each is going to introduce themselves super briefly with a slide and some photos. And then we're going to open it up for a group Q&A. So if you think about questions that come up during their presentation or during the conversation, please use the chat. You can also raise your hand, come off camera, and we can hear your voice and add your voice to the conversation too. It's a pretty kind of a smallish group this morning, so we should be able to have a good conversation. And then we do have some news around the network. And then at the end, for folks who are CCAs, we have a slide to get your continuing ed units there. I think we can, I kind of already mentioned who's who here, but again, we have Dan Kelley, McLean County farmer, Ed Dubrick in Iroquois County, and Jeff O'Connor in Kankakee County. And gratitude to all three of you, because I know it's a busy time of year and lots going on in the agriculture world. So I think with that, we can pull up Dan's pictures there. And Dan, I will turn it over to you to just kind of give an introduction, walk us through the pictures you sent us, tell us a little bit about your farming operation, history, location, what kind of crops and conservation practices, etc.
Well, thank you, Jean, and thank you for the invitation to be part of the panel.
I farm with two brothers. Have done that for right now at 50 years. We raise corn and soybeans in McLean County. Located in Normal is my address, and then we farm on the north and east side of Bloomington Normal. Um, I also have a son that is joined the operation about a decade ago, and his son is now helping part time. So we're at 7 generations at my grandson, and my family originally came from Ireland to Ohio and then made their way west to, fortunately, stopped in a good part of Illinois. Uh, so I got involved with cover crops through a program through the USDA NRCS for the Lake Bloomington watershed. Lake Bloomington is one of the two primary sources of water for the city of Bloomington. And it's probably no surprise they were seeing some nitrate levels that at certain times of the year weren't acceptable. And so they developed a program to support ways to reduce nitrates in the drinking water. And that was through the NRCS and the Soil and Water Conservation District. And so I've been using cover crops on both corn and soybeans, specifically in that area, but I've also taken it to other farms that we have to do some experimenting, learn as we grow. Every year is different. We've had some very successful years and some that probably weren't a great cover crop, but at the end of the day, we had something to cover the ground over the winter and help with that nitrate issue that I addressed. But we have, in addition to my son and grandson, we have 3 children, 7 grandchildren. We just had a wedding in the family last Saturday, so the family continues to grow a bit. And so look forward to learning. I'm by far not an expert on cover crops. I have some experience with it, but I hope to learn from the others on the panel as well.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, and just a really quick follow-up question on that is like you mentioned kind of getting into conservation and specifically cover crops through this Lake Bloomington watershed group. Is that still an active group? And was there kind of like an opportunity for you to meet other farmers or work with your neighbors to address that water
Yeah.
quality problem?
Yes, and it's actually it started the professors that monitored and did the water testing, and they tested tile lines that eventually would go into Lake Bloomington. It's a combination of a professor at Illinois State University and at Purdue University, so it's a research project for them as well, and they do the monitoring of it, and it's still active. I think it's at least 10 years it's been an active program and continues. And so one of the benefits of it to me is that they provide the seed, and so that obviously is an economic benefit, and that helps. And then, but we can get into some of the challenges a little later.
Sure. All right. Thanks. Yeah, I think I'll shift over to Ed then, and can kind of we have a lot of great photos here, including some chickens, and I know you're actively spending time with the chickens right now, Ed. But if you want to maybe give an introduction of your farm operation and how you got into farming and any networks.
Yeah. So our farm started in 2020. I'm a first generation farmer. My wife and I, we raised, we're an atypical farm in Illinois. Aside from sweet corn, we don't plant corn or soybeans. So, but we raise poultry produce on 7.5 acres in Cissna Park, Illinois. Been utilizing cover crops since probably 2020, probably that first year. I come from a retail ag agronomy background and was seeing the customers that I served there that were using cover crops and the benefits they were getting on it, especially in some tighter clay type soils. And that's what we have at our home farm, and our market garden was especially rough. So utilizing cover crops over the years, and have really seen an impact. I can grow carrots now in Bryce Swigert soil, and that's probably my proudest accomplishment I've ever had in my life. If you know that soil, you know it can be just as bad as a gravel parking lot. So, but we've also implemented multiple other conservation practices. You can see my son standing there in front of some of the rye we had in our market garden. And then on the right, it's kind of hard to tell, but we put in about 10,000 square feet of a pollinator plot. And so we use that to, one, provide habitat, but then also to attract beneficial insects for our market garden, increase pollination, bring some of the predators in for what I would call destructive pests on crops too. So just trying to do things in a more holistic way. And then this year we've added 5 acres of pasture that we're converting from. It was corn a year ago, converting it to pasture this year. So we put a diverse cover crop mix out there last fall to hopefully kickstart some of that soil biology to get it going from, corn soy rotation into a perennial pasture. Didn't quite have the success we wanted with it because we got in so late with it, but it was definitely a learning curve and something, I'll know for next time and can maybe tweak. So yeah, that's enough about me. Thanks. Glad to be here. I'm excited to learn from everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I have a lot of questions about you as a first generation farmer and kind of maybe learning a little bit more about how important the networks and networking was to you. But I guess maybe just to start and hold some of those conversations for a more panel discussion, if you have any quick thoughts about where new farmers can go to network and learn and get into this community of farmers in Illinois.
Yeah, I would say, your first call for me was, I was in the retail ag space, so it was more so just like leaning on people I knew that were doing it and trying to adapt it. I don't have a 20-foot grain drill that I'm going to put my Sierra rye down with. I was broadcasting with the lawn spreader, but I could still learn things from someone who was doing it that way. What's the timing look like? How are you terminating it? What's your goals for this? So just finding those like-minded farmers, people who are trying these things. For me, that was through work. That was through some organizations I'm a part of. I also work full-time for the Illinois Stewardship Alliance, and we've got a bunch of great farmers in there that I've bounced ideas off of before in the past. Soil and water conservation districts are excellent help. NRCS. I went through NRCS for a pollinator, so for some other conservation programs we've used. So those are all places I would start, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, thank you. I think we'll turn it over to Jeff O'Connor then, our third farmer panelist this morning. And yeah, Jeff, you want to just kind of introduce yourself and your operation?
I would be glad to do that, Jean. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedules to be here. As the slide says there, I am in Kankakee County, which the characteristics of Kankakee, there are areas of very heavy soils, but also because of glacial outwash, there's a lot of areas of sandy loams with sandhills. That characteristic is what has defined a lot of what our farm has been. I'm a third generation user of rye as a cover crop, even though the family's been here a lot longer. And I really value that statement because I did grow up seeing, a grandfather seed down sandhills to keep them in place, probably because my grandmother would always yell at the blowing dirt in the house. But that is something that I grew up with and seen my dad do. And I think myself and my own children, I have 3 adult children, but I think every one of them learned how to seed sand hills with a small drill out in the middle of a field where they couldn't hurt anybody. But so we always had that practice of valuing keeping the land in place. And at some point, and it's been somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, decided, hey, what would happen if we actually seeded a whole field down into rye? And that was the beginning of this third generation of what sustainability cover crops looks like. We use those practices to enhance our corn and soybean production. I also do raise some wheat that is followed by double crop soybeans. But one of the tenets of what I always fall back to is I love on this farm to tell a story. We have a lot of international groups that have come through the farm from outside organizations as well as through the Illinois Soybean Association. And to me, there's nothing like standing in a field with either a local farmer or with someone from halfway across the world sharing that story. The picture on the left, we're looking at double crop soybeans from just a couple years ago. And what I like to take that back into, and I think it's also what we've built our adoption of practices is the slide on the right. I am still so curious about being able to look at that clump. That's a macro aggregate right there, definitely. But to be able to look at soil and to still see the mycorrhizal fungi, the pores that are created by earthworms, and just to see what health looks like, and to be able to show people that picture, if I could have that clump of soil with them, if you were to break it open slowly, you can hear that fungi and the small roots from cover crops tearing apart, and really drive home that message of we can keep soil exactly where it belongs. In this region of Kankakee, yeah, we've been in the news from, being the heart of where the dust storm started. That made Chicago news, and most recently this weekend of excess nitrates. Because we're in a geography where we have highly variable soils, tile drainage is necessary. And the adoption of tile in this area just to be able to make land more productive is intense. And that's now being, unfortunately, being brought up with excess nitrate. So those are a few basics of the farm, and I'm sure we'll cover a little more of that as we go on.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you more about this picture of soil because I do feel like, every farmer I've ever met cares deeply about their soil. And so you mentioned the sand hills. Have you seen, did I hear you right that you started cover crops 20 years ago? Did I hear that right?
No, it would go for the on a whole field scale, Gene, yes.
Okay.
It would go back almost that far, somewhere between 15 and 20. All farmers get to a point where they know they've done it a long time, but they're not exactly sure.
Sure when. Yeah.
But I did remember, going back into the 70s and 80s, the annual seeding of sand hills to prevent them from blowing, but we just did the sand hills.
Mm-hmm. And have you seen, so going back to the picture of soil, have you seen kind of the soil health improve over that time?
Yeah, definitely, Gene. Now, I don't want to mislead anyone. A sand hill once is a sand hill forever, but it doesn't blow, and it's much easier to farm when you're not doing the tillage on it. What have I seen for soil health? Yes, we can substantiate by doing soil tests, what's actually going on in the soil, that even with decreases of fertilizer, we've seen the actual fertility levels being increased. I know where that's coming from, but to me, there's so much inexact science that I don't burden myself with trying to understand every number down to the 10th, and 100th place. It's like, what can you visibly see? And that's why I love being able to dig up soil like that, is because if you can see it, you really don't have to explain a lot of what's going on to visitors like are on the left. The
Mhm.
basics are just, it's so easy to see.
Sure. Yeah, great. Well, I think we can pull the slides down, and then I'm just looking forward to kind of having a conversation with the three farmers here. And again, a reminder to folks in the audience, if you have questions to ask, put them in the chat, but you can also raise your hand, and I'm happy to invite you into the conversation in real time. But I guess a starter question off for all three of you is, I didn't read your bios to everybody here, but the bios you provided indicated um, kind of a lot of like outward facing service and engagement with community groups or other networks. And so I'm just kind of hoping maybe we can kind of go around the table and understand a little bit more about how your role in those organizations helped you have a better understanding or a bigger understanding or whatever. And so maybe just kind of going backwards in order. Jeff, you mentioned the Soil and Water Conservation Soil and Water Conservation District. I think you're on the board there, and very engaged in the Illinois Soybean Association. You're also a CCA and part of the STAR group. So those are just four things I picked up from your bio, and I know you do a lot. So maybe talk about if any of those or how any of those helped shape your thinking about agriculture, your role, both in Illinois as well as globally, if that's applicable.
Sure. Uh, it is, you need to know where those sources of comfort are to have conversations that may be new. By nature, I'm usually curious, so I enjoy asking questions. And yes, sitting on a board for soil and water, it meant you had at least monthly contact with NRCS. At some point, I'm sure I asked questions about a program, looking at funding, but you knew you had a comfortable source that you could go to. I feel advantaged that I had that once a month. Um, so it was easy to adopt, but I also knew that in that position, I also needed to lead. And there's a difference between being a leader and a manager, but at some point I needed to set by example, and it fell in line with the goals and the values we had for the farm. Which our farm is a medium farm, 850 to 900 acres. It's pretty much always stayed that size, with the primary goal of protecting the land, trying to produce more with less impact and with as little work as possible. But that meant also then finding individuals or organizations who shared some of that goal. So it's finding similar goals and then use them for resources when I felt it was necessary. Farmers by nature don't want to. We have so much seasonal work that goes on, not only physically, but just the planning. There's so much intense planning with farming, and it's gotten more difficult. I feel like I only have small amounts of time every season to think actively about cover crops. But because I was placed in front of NRCS so frequently, I knew that when I had the question, I could go there. So it's trying for me to introduce other people to those same networks on a routine basis, even if they're not actively needing them right now, but to know where to go. So just know what's available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Ed, I did kind of do a teaser question there as a first generation farmer, and you mentioned your role with the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the Stewardship Alliance and your role there, or if there's other groups. And again, I'm more interested in highlighting your experience as a first generation farmer who maybe doesn't have that ready network or didn't see how, parents or grandparents did it. Yeah, just maybe talk a little bit more about that and sources of information, sources of network connections for you.
Yeah, I'll often joke that a lot of my farming knowledge comes from my Google bachelor's and my YouTube PhD. So lots of online research. I'm of that generation to where that's easily accessible. I'm on there type of deal, hunting things down, and I've definitely found some great sources for things like that. But also, like Jeff said, finding those people you can ask those questions to. So for me, some of that's other farmers inside the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. We've got a lot of folks all across the state that have been doing this a lot longer than the 5-6 years I've been trying. And my grandpa used to tell me you won't live long enough to make all your own mistakes, so you better learn from other people's. And I've taken that to heart and try and what works for you in your context may be different than my context, but there's things I can adapt and change. And I think I kind of touched on a little bit the equipment challenges of being small. I might cover crop a 6,000 square foot plot rather than 60 acres, or like this past fall when we cover cropped that 5 acres, I rented a drill and tractor from a friend and a neighbor to do it. So it's just things like that and finding how that works. But yeah, just trying to take the pieces I can and think creatively, apply my context and put them on our farm. So that way we're changing our soil health for the better and, capturing that carbon, increasing our yields. Those types of things are important to us. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. And then Dan, back, I think we'll round out this question with you in terms of other roles outside of farming. So per your bio, you spent some time working for Growmark. You're on the board with the Illinois Ag Leadership Program and also part of the Global Farmer Network and Illinois State University. So lots of kind of global and beyond Illinois entities there. Maybe talk a little bit about how those networks have informed your farming operation, as well as how your farming operation has maybe strengthened or value added your role with those groups.
Well, yes, Gene, I think the thing that I have experienced, whether I'm on an agave farm in Mexico or near the Great Wall or China, or on a hop farm in the state of Washington. All farmers like to talk about farming. They like to learn about each other's operation. They like to have people that respect what they're doing. And so it provides you can learn different things. There's no doubt about that, because every farmer has the same goal to make their farm better, and for most of us to pass it on to the next generation better than we found it. But I do believe that they're also open to questions about their operation, and we can learn from them. And so I think the idea of sustainability has been in agriculture for maybe forever, and because if you define sustainability as making it better, then that's what it's about. Mm-hmm. But one of the challenges for the time that I put into those organizations that you mentioned and some others is making sure I've got enough time to farm. And so I've been fortunate to have, as I mentioned earlier, 2 brothers and now a son who has filled that gap. And I've been able to probably have larger machinery than I would need if I was if I didn't have that time away. But that's how we make it work here. But I do believe that the ability to interact with others, to learn from others, and Ed's right. You can Google a lot these days, and YouTube. I just passed my CDL test. I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos. But overall, and one thing that Ed kind of prompted me, our local NRCS has 3 grain drills, I believe. They're not very large. They're more of a 10 or 12 foot. But they do rent out for individuals that want to do some cover crops or seed waterways or whatever. So I don't know the exact terms, but they are on a rental basis.
That's a great kind of setup for my next question in terms of like, what are the key resources that you know about that you think others would benefit from? And so we already talked about YouTube and Google and so on. There's kind of an endless amount of information out there. Help people figure out, like, where do you start, or how do you know where to focus on? Or if you don't know about those grain drills, how do you learn about them? So maybe I'll pitch this back to you, Dan, to start thinking through that, some of those services that exist in the community that people just may not know about.
Well, I think, I just mentioned I'm on the foundation board at Illinois State. That's where I graduated from. That's one place to start, because every ag school has an agronomy department, and you can that's a resource. But I'm probably only 3 miles from our USDA office here in Normal, and they have a wealth of information on a variety of things. They'll help the EQIP program, from no-till practices, cover crops, waterway, tiling, various opportunities there. And there are cost sharing that can go into those programs if you meet certain requirements. And so it doesn't cost a thing to have the conversation. Then deciding what you want to do in terms of for your farm, what works, and can you meet the requirements that some of those programs have. But I have never picked up the phone or stopped at the office to ask a question that they weren't willing to, share the knowledge that they had. So I would encourage anyone to do not hesitate to stop in or make a phone call to those offices. And then the other side of it is I deal with Evergreen FS here, and so my local plant manager, salesman, they have the cover crop seed. They've had some experience. They can share what worked down in Decatur that may or may not work at Normal. And so if you've got some trusted advisors, trusted business partners, they also are an important source of knowledge. And he he has counterparts in 5 counties here in the central part of the state. So if he doesn't know an answer, he may say, well, I was talking with so-and-so and this is how they do it there. Why don't you call him? So there's a variety of resources. And again, farmers themselves, if you see a farmer that's using cover crops, I'm sure he's going to be happy to tell you the pluses and minuses and tell you about his experiences. So
Sure.
knock on his door.
Yeah. Well, and the pluses and minuses are really important too. And it goes back, I think, to what Ed said about learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
There's not enough time in your life to make all the mistakes yourself. I do see Leah has her hand raised, so I'll invite her to join the conversation if she has a question relevant to what resources or information.
Yeah. Apologies, I'm not on camera. I'm actually driving to Illinois right now for the Soil Health Leadership Program. But so this is the first year we've had all of our 450 acres in cover crops. And on 3 of our fields, we had an 8-way mix that when I say it was a success, it was a grand success. Like the field is so thick with barley and cereal rye, vetch, clover, and more. It's my dad tried to start planting it this week and got about 10 feet in, and everything was tangled up because we don't have huge machinery. What's the right way to deal with this? Because I think he's gonna put it in corn this year. It's been in beans, I think, the last 2 years. What's the right way to do this? Like, it is so thick. Like, it's not just tall. Like when I went out to take soil health samples to the Region Ag Labs 2 weekends ago, I mean, I had to clear away like 2 feet just to be able to get my shovel in the ground. What do we do?
Yeah, it's a great question, Leah. Any from our panelists, any thoughts or tips?
Leah, first thing I would say would be congratulations, you've started your learning curve. I have not worked with that intensive mixes, but I want you to know the size of the equipment does not, larger equipment's not necessarily the answer either. It just means you're going to spend longer to untangle things, and you're going to. So yeah, there's a strong learning
That's
curve
funny.
there. I would reach into those resources, and what I usually tell people who are trying something more diverse than myself, honestly, the Facebook groups on conservation, regenerative ag, if you need to find people who have been in the exact same scenario that you are currently in, and I've not been there, so I would guide you to that direction.
Dan or Ed, anything to add?
Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
I was just going to say, my question, I guess I got a question back for you. Are you trying to plant into it green or are you planting into it burned off?
No, we're planting into it green. We've been dissuaded from chemically terminating before that, before planting. So, and we planted into other fields green just fine, but that was primarily cereal rye, and that just laid down real nice. But this stuff is just thick. So, yeah.
I was going to say, I was going to recommend planting green, as I've worked with farmers in the past that have tried to burn it down first, and then it becomes harder. You almost got to wait 2 weeks for that to get more brittle. But I don't have an answer for you right offhand then, but I'd encourage you to check out what Jeff's, echo Jeff's sentiment there, I guess.
Thank you.
I would agree. One of the things that, and I don't know how your planter's set up, but having sharp disc and not using row cleaners is important when you have that thick of a mass. So I think making sure, learning from others, whether it be a Facebook group or others that have had that.
Interesting, because we do use row cleaners, and so talk me through that a little bit more. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Is that just more stuff for things to get tangled in?
Yes. Yeah, the road cleaners will tend to wrap, and you end up having more problems. The road cleaner's idea is to move, basically any obstacles in front of that disc. But if you've got 2 feet of material, it's going to create just a big ball of green material. And so, yeah, and as far as burn down, what Ed said is exactly right. Either you burn it down early enough to let it die, or you plant in green and then burn it off. But I can almost picture your challenge, and it'll be a learning curve, but there are solutions.
I mean, it's so beautiful out there. I mean, we have those enormous honeybees, and it's like heartbreaking to think about burning it down. But I mean, I know we have to. But it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
A great question, Leah. And I think Dan mentioning road cleaners, it seems like kind of one of those secrets that Leah didn't know about, but others may have been familiar with. So my question for each of the panelists is there a secret that you know now that you wish you had known before you made whatever mistake you made?
Well, we seed all of our cover crops by air, and we do that around Labor Day. The corn usually Labor Day, beans. It's when the leaves are predominantly yellow, and we can get the seed to the ground. And then, of course, we depend on rainfall to get it. So one of the things that I learned the hard way was that we had a rain forecast. This goes back 6 or 7 years ago. Rain forecast around the last day of August. So we thought, great, let's go ahead and get the cover crop seeded. Well, we got that rain. And when you seed oats into standing soybeans, eventually you have to harvest those soybeans. And what we found out was we got that ideal rain, got the oats up about 6 to 8 inches tall. So we pulled into the field to harvest those soybeans at 10 o'clock one morning, and ended up with a combine packed with green oats. You'd be amazed how hot that gets in a very short period of time. So we learned that. So we came back that afternoon after it dried off a bit, and we got through the harvest fine, but it was slower. What we've decided is that we're not going to seed quite that early, because sometimes it's too much of a good thing. Maybe that's a little bit of what Leah has, but you just have to time your seeding to make sure that you're able to get the crop off. Now, corn, that's not an issue because just harvest the ear, but when you're running a sickle an inch off the ground, you take in way too many oats when it's 6 to 8 inches tall.
Yeah. I am interested in hearing, I see Leah, your hand up again. Is it kind of a general question or quick?
No. It was just piggybacking on that. The first year that we did real serious cover crops, we did the same thing. And we had, you have to set the head so low to get all the beans, and we had cover crops just all tangled up in the combine. Yeah, we learned that too.
Yeah. Jeff, any skeletons in your closet in terms of mistakes that you may or may not want to admit to?
I have made every single one of them. I think what transformed those mistakes was I had to learn to ignore the message that is put out in the public so often. In fact, it's put out all the time, which is that message is farmers are the best stewards of the land. I had to learn to ignore that, because using that phrase, it said everything should look perfect all the time from the roadway. I had to transform that statement into what level of stewardship am I trying to attain? And when you accept that as one of your driving goals, higher levels of stewardship, it means things aren't going to look like the neighbors, things aren't going to look like the pictures in magazines. And So I really had to transform how I viewed it and ignore the phrase farmers are the best stewards of the land and transform that into what level of stewardship am I willing to attain and live with things looking different.
I think that's a really great challenging question for us to think about as well, just in terms of what does it mean to be a steward and what, yeah, right. I mean, what is really being a steward mean and what is our goal? So a conversation for us to have another time, I think. Ed, I'll pitch it to you and see if there's any mistakes or lessons learned that we can all learn from here.
Yeah. I've played around with lots of different mixes and, started off with just cereal rye and like a daikon radish. I've used oats in a daikon. I've gone up to 8-way mixes before that had vetch and this and that. And for me, because on our market garden, we do not use herbicides. That's just our practices in our market kind of require that for us to do it that way. Not saying I have a issue with chemical burn downs, but just how we grow it there, what I've learned is I will never put hairy vetch in my market garden again. It is very difficult for me at my scale to terminate and crimp effectively without tillage, and without some more tillage than what I'd like to do, I'll say. So for me, that's one thing we've learned. I can crimp cereal rye real easy, and I can keep it down. But when the vetch was in the mix, it was too difficult. So we've eliminated that from a lot of our cover crop mixes. Just from our scale, our standpoint, it's very difficult to control.
Yeah. Okay. We do have a question in the chat from Keegan, and he's asking about how your water management has evolved with soil health practices and whether they've worked in tandem. And I like this question. So thinking about water, but if there's other changes that you've also been able to make, whether that's herbicide use or fertility or anything like that, kind of thinking about how that has evolved. Who wants to go first on that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd love to take that one because um, my family started pattern tiling farms back in the 80s before it was common, and that's something we just did on all ground. So we do very intensively drain our ground to increase the number of days that the field is trafficable without causing damage. But I bet it's at least 20 years ago, we were one of the first people to put in water control structures. I think we're somewhere around 15 of those now. We've used that for sub irrigation. So we've learned to be able to shut that off because we always know there's going to be a point at which we will need that additional water. So we drain, but then control. And then the third part of that is to see what soil health does for increasing infiltration. It's so easy to say we have runoff problems. Yes, lands with slope, severe do have runoff problems. But if we can get a handle on and maximize our infiltration rates, we do so much for cleaning up the water. As well as edge of field practices, but our water holding capacity. And we have done some testing through Soil and Water Conservation District, moisture sensors to see how these practices of a terminated cover crop, no-till, actually increases available soil moisture. Yeah, there's a lot that can be learned in tandem with these cover crop practices and water management.
Nice.
And
Dan?
we radish in our cover crop mix. I've seen better, water drainage, fewer pond, and especially in pond areas. It's definitely helped. Of course, those ponds also have tile drainage as well. But I think another benefit is weed control. We have a very unpopular weed called water hemp in this area, and very prolific. And where we have a cover crop, it tends to minimize or reduce anyway. I didn't maybe minimize as a wish, but reduce the impact of weeds and especially water hemp. So that's been a positive from cover crops.
I've definitely noticed a huge increase in our water infiltration, and it's a combination of factors, not just our cover crops that we apply. But I spoke about how we're a poultry farm. And so one of my renewable resources is composted poultry litter. So adding that organic matter on top of the cover crops, we have been able to increase our organic matter in our soil over 2% in 5 years, which is just absolutely crazy. And I didn't believe it. And I told the lab to rerun it. But that was what it was. And I was shocked. But knowing that, for every percent of organic matter, you're able to withhold 1 more inch of rainfall and or infiltrate. So I've seen that we have less runoff when we do have those 3-4 inch rain events. And I've also seen that, when we turn droughty, even from just 4 years ago, when it doesn't rain the whole month of June and everything's withering up, our crops are holding on longer, because one, we do have that. We have increased organic matter, increased water holding capacity. We're hanging on to it. But then also we have that cover crop mulch that's refracting some of that sunlight and keeping that moisture there. So definitely water use benefits.
So I think just maybe wrapping up this conversation, I'll ask each of you to think and comment briefly on what's next for your farm. Maybe it's where do you see the next challenge or the next opportunity for your farm, or if you're not quite sure about that, Illinois agriculture in general. And Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot first because I know you're part of the Ag Leadership Program, and we talk a lot about kind of Illinois agriculture and global agriculture.
Yeah. So it's twofold. One is I'm at the age we're transitioning to the next generation as part of what we're doing, and getting my son and his son to see what are benefits. Is cover crop something we want to do across our whole farm? And I think the other thing that I've heard a couple presentations on artificial intelligence, and that is going to be a game changer in some way. And I think for myself and others to get an understanding of how life is going to change and what's the next stage of Google, of Zoom. And, and I do think that, especially with Zoom, we can go anywhere in the world and learn something and have these type of conversations. So I think developing a network of people that you can learn from and trust that they're going to be candid and frankly tell you what you might be doing wrong, so that you don't have to make all of your own mistakes, as was addressed earlier.
Yeah, and being receptive and open to that kind of critical feedback sometimes, right? Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Jeff.
Yeah, what I would love to see for the next generation is the development of a very strong farmer-to-farmer peer network. I always welcome phone calls during the busy seasons when a farmer says from just a couple miles away, here's what I did with my cover crop. Do I plant now or do I wait for it to die down? When things are really challenging, there is nothing like the voice of another farmer talking another one off the cliff for doing edge of the cliff from doing something inappropriate. And it's like, no, it's okay. This is going to work out. But here are your options. There is nothing like that firsthand experience. And it's not trying to belittle or diminish any of the roles and capacities from, everybody on this call. But when it comes down to it, that farmer to farmer network, it means so much.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. Ed.
Yeah, for me, it's moving towards more integration of livestock with cropping. It's difficult for us to do on our market garden just because of some of the rules around food safety and 90-day intervals between raw manure and harvest. But we've had some preliminary discussions with a couple of our neighbors who cover crop, both I'll say winter cover crops like cereal rye, as well as summer cover crops after wheat, like a sorghum Sudan type mix. About getting our livestock on their land. Maybe that's running a pass of sheep through on a sorghum Sudan in July and August when my pastures are petering out, but that stuff's growing like crazy. And trying to increase that soil health for them. And I get a forage surf, they get animal manure. What's that look like type of deal? And the same thing along with our laying hens too, and running those through different areas. So just trying to incorporate that and build soil health with livestock as well. So.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, all three of you, for joining us this morning and sharing your thoughts and ideas and kind of helping us build this network. I completely agree, Jeff, that farmer to farmer learning is so valuable, and part of what we're trying to do is connect dots and facilitate. And I think one of the things, so round of applause to the three of you. Very much gratitude for spending time here this morning. And just kind of highlight, we'll wrap up here with a few slides about what ISAP is trying to do to foster farmer-to-farmer networks. I think we do have, for those that may not be familiar, we have a conservation story map that lists farmers and many other people who are willing to share and connect and maybe talk some people off the cliff. So you can go there. It's conservation hyphen story hyphen map. The URL is there, and I think we'll drop it in the chat too. But the conservation story map features demo sites. So these are places where maybe they're at universities or maybe they're farms or whatever, where you can actually go and see some practices in use. You can connect with researchers, service providers, conservation professionals, and farmers. They're not listed. Oh, they are listed there specifically. And then it includes notation for anybody who's been part of ISAP's program and CCAs, and you can filter down. So if you're really interested in something about nutrient management, you can select that as a practice, or you can select cover crops as a practice, et cetera. So Leah, this would be a great place for you to go to the story map and find somebody who has cover crop expertise and ask them about those row cleaners for you. And so check that out, definitely. But then also go the next step. We have the next slide. You can add your PIN to the story map. There's a form or a link right on that site to add your information, and you can be part of our growing network. And you can use the story map, as I mentioned, to connect with like-minded conservation professionals and businesses. And then it'll just allow us and you to share story and learn from each other across Illinois. We have over 100+ pins there now, I think, and we want to see this continue growing and really just help facilitate farmer-to-farmer learning and connections with others. One other way you can kind of be part of the network, ISAP, is primarily a group of professionals, but we do interact with farmers, and a lot of those professionals work directly with farmers. So it's kind of a train the trainer model. But whether you're a farmer or an ag professional, a beginner or an expert or pro, whatever, you can engage with ISAP. You can join us on LinkedIn. We do have a Facebook page, and then we post this video and many others on YouTube. So the farmers on our panel, we're all using YouTube and social media for really positive learning things. I know sometimes we can go down rabbit holes and doom scroll. So I don't want you to doom scroll. If you're looking for something to learn and engage with, check out some of those ISAP resources there. Links in the chat there. And then part of what we want to do is just help people know what else is going on in the network. So some events that ISAP has identified already, and we share this information both on our website and in the aggregate. There's a cover crop tools webinar by the Midwest Cover Crop Council coming up next week, June 16th through 18th. American Farmland Trust is convening a survey right now to learn more about perennial crops and specifically perennial bioenergy opportunities. And that survey closes the end of July. I think we'll be putting lots of links here, and we'll follow up with an email with all these links as well. And then there's easements for land access. I'm not sure who's hosting that, but certainly conservation easements and farmland protection is something that is important for the future of Illinois agriculture. And then the Illinois Farm Bureau has their nutrient stewardship field days, a couple of those coming up in July in Cook County and Clinton County. If you have an event, I know earlier Leah posted a farmer meeting happening near St. Louis. Encourage you to just use the chat over the next few minutes to add any event information that you know about, just to make sure people are aware and have some more learning opportunities. What's the next slide? Next slide, is there, let me see. Oh, and join us. Yes, I forgot this. One of you, and I don't remember, I think it was Dan, you mentioned working with your egg retailer from the co-op. We recognize and appreciate all of the expertise they bring, and they really are a trusted advisor of so many farmers. And so next month at this call, we are highlighting three very similar formatting. We're having a panel discussion with 3 egg retailers and talking about how those farm advisors are engaging with farmers and helping to support conservation on the ground. So that is July 9th at 9 a.m. And it's kind of the same link. It's a repeating thing. So hope you'll join us there. And yeah, thank you, Jeff, Dan and Ed again. And then I think we have a poll, final wrap-up poll here. You can answer that. And while you're answering that, there's also I think a final slide with CCA credits. And we can just kind of leave that up until we close out. We have about a couple minutes left before the top of the hour, so people can answer their poll. And any last questions? Or I still see Dan and Ed. Any last parting words of wisdom you want to share with us?
No, I think Ed said it well. Learn from others' mistakes so you don't have to make your own. But at the same time, don't be afraid to try something on a limited basis, and realize that every year is different. And just be willing to reach out. And again, what I think both Ed and Jeff have said, don't hesitate to ask your neighbors who may have a similar experience to yours or different experience. We're all willing to help each other as best we can.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
And don't, we talked a lot about seeking information and talking to folks, and don't get so caught up in that you have paralysis by analysis. Like Dan said, don't be scared to try it on a small patch, or don't, maybe you don't do it on the 80 that's on the highway your first time. Maybe you do it in the back 40 that no one sees,
Yeah.
but try it that way and get a taste for it before you take it further. So.
And get started. Yeah, both. Oh, great. I got a lot of nuggets of wisdom out of today's conversation, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really grateful to have spent the morning with you and with everybody in our audience. So I wish everybody a great June, great summer, and join us again in July. Thank you.
Take care, Gene. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.